to me the parting glass and drink a health whate'er befall. Then gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be.
I'm going to pick 3 America's Cup stories that I think are pretty interesting. The first one is the 1995, that final race. So I'll just bring you back. It was the final race of the Defender Series. We were set up with the women's team to whoever won was going to go into the finals against the American New York Yacht Club Young America team. So it was between us and Dennis Conner, and Dennis Conner had set the scene that he did not like the women on the water. He didn't really not like us on the water. He just had no use for us. I think that was almost his exact quote. And so we were out there and it was coming up. So it was the last race and it was light air. We had up at the top, the last top mark, we were way ahead. We put up our A0, which in those days just meant a very light spinnaker. And we had the budget, so we had an A0. It was so small because there was no wind. It was maybe 4 knots by the time we got to the top mark. We came up around the top mark. The spectator fleet was there, so there was actually a lee of a spectator fleet, and we were headed down toward, we put the spinnaker up, we got it full. I scurried up to the gooseneck and I looked up to see if there was any wind. There was, I said, the only wind I see is way over there off of Point Loma. At that point, we had a tactician and a navigator, and the navigator said, but we're almost pointing at the mark, which was, it was much favored. It was like 18 degrees favored to be going where we were going. So we had the option of maybe jibing and heading over towards shore. There wasn't a lot of discussion about stay in front, do a quick jibe and back, because in these boats, we had jumpers, which are like a top spreader that holds the top of the mast on, and the huge asymmetric sails, especially in light air, when you were jibing them, it was a real possibility that would get caught on the backside of the top spreader, the jumper, and then when you go to trim it, it would rip. Now, we would always have somebody up there to be able to kick it around, either Merritt or Susie, but it was very much in our minds. So we are going down, we're not jibing, we're not jibing, we're not jibing, and Dennis comes around 6 minutes behind us. ESPN had been following it. Gary Jobson announces to all of the sports world that the women are going into the finals and they go to baseball. Dennis jibed because you can't win by following, right? So he jibed and he headed over towards shore. He got into that puff. They say that they saw it. They didn't see it. They were thinking they were going home. I had seen it. They got into the puff and then they were coming back at us. So we then jibe, of course, because we have to jibe. So we're down 3/4 of the way down the leg. We engage and so then he comes in, he luffs us, and we end up with a smaller sail because at this point the apparent wind speed is better for the big sail, where our A0 was better for the super light sail going VMG downwind. And he comes up and we end up finishing with him about 1/4 of a boat length in front. That was the end of our racing for that series. Katie Pettibone was on the boat and she said, what are we going to do now? And I said, we're going to do another America's Cup. At some point, I had already been thinking about America True. And I wanted to do things differently because in the 1995 campaign, the 3-boat deal, all of the decisions were made by men, even men that were our coaches, but I had been better than them in the previous campaign. I'd been more senior. So just because I was a female, I was on the boat and I was demoted, so I wasn't part of leadership, which goes back to you need women to be in decision making, own your own boat, be in power, and be able to control your own destiny. So now America True, Auckland, New Zealand, we were one of 3 American teams down there, and four American teams, and we had a bright yellow boat. We were mixed. I wanted to have a mixed team. There's a whole bunch of stories about how I got there. I put the entry fee on my Visa card, all sorts of great stories. But this is the one race where we were coming into towards the end, the semifinals. If we won this last race, we would end up going into the semifinals and not even have to race the last race against the French. And we were racing against the Japanese. It was blowing 28, 30 knots. It was, these boats were not designed for that. So we go into the match race start. And the way you, for those of you that don't do match racing, you do circles. And so we did a circle to try to keep our position, and the umpires judged that we were too close on our jibe. We hadn't gotten onto we hadn't done a clean jibe and gotten onto starboard in time. So we got a penalty. It's part of the game. You keep racing. It's wet, it's cold, it's crazy. And then, so the Japanese are ahead of us with Peter Gilmore steering, and they were a little bit early, and they had just opened up just enough gap for us to get in between them and the committee boat, or so we thought. The waves were huge. We went up and over a wave that pushed us towards them a little bit, and their boat, Gilmore just shoved it up, and their mast went straight up. We're heeled over at like 28 degrees, and the top of our mast hit. And I distinctly remember a Japanese sailor jumping up and giving an Italian salute as our wind instruments came running down their main and then bounced off the deck and went in the water. So now we have two penalties. It's blowing 25, 28, and we have to do our first penalty, because you can have one penalty and you don't have to do it except for before finishing. But if you have two, you have to do one of them right away. You can only be holding one penalty. So we've crossed the starting line, penalty, second penalty. So we have to do our jibe, which is on legs 1 and 3. And we end up going downwind probably 12 boat lengths below the start line. So we're going backwards 12 boat lengths, and Gilmore's already taking off going upwind. But there's a little bit of history between Gilly and John Cutler, who is our helmsman. Gilmore was John's coach before, and what he told the management was, I'm better than John. So he basically got John pushed out of the team. There was no love lost. Gilmore also doesn't really trust his team. So what we did, knowing the psychology, is that when he was sitting going upwind, he's facing forward, we would just hip up. We would get into the position where the helmsperson, Peter Gilmore, would have to do this to see our boat. And then he's not going forward very well. He's not trusting his team. And we would just crunch, 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 crunch up, crunch, 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 crunch up. By the second upwind mark, we were ahead, which was insane. But we weren't ahead far enough to be able to do on the downwind leg, our tack with the spinnaker below, the gooseneck, and then stay in front. So our only option there is to slow down. So we slow down to try to engage. And I actually had to call John Cutler and ask him, because it was so amazing and so crazy. We're still not positive exactly what happened. But as we collectively remember it, we got him engaged. We luffed up. He didn't respond. So we thought but there was no penalty call. So we still are holding a penalty. So we go at it again, and he doesn't respond. Boats hit, and there's a hole in our boat. Like, you can't see it on the Zoom. Like a 3-foot hole in the side of our boat. So then he gets offset on the penalty. But because we had done two, they determined that the second one was too much on our side. So all of a sudden we have another penalty. So we basically do the same thing over again, hole number 2 in our boat. And then at this point, and I forgot to say, we take the spinnaker down to pull him in, and then we put the spinnaker up to try to get away, and then we realize we have to go at him again, so we take the spinnaker down. So we're up, spinnaker down, spinnaker up, spinnaker down, and then after the second hole in the boat, we're out here, and there was one Hail Mary thing that they had left that they could do, and that would be, and it still is in the rules, if you luff a boat and you anticipate that they might want to take the spinnaker down, you have to give them an opportunity. This was a brand new thing in the 2000 Cup. So what they basically did is just smoke the spinnaker halyard and tried to hit us with it to say that we hadn't given them the opportunity. They didn't hit us, they missed. Spinnaker went in the water, they shrimped, and Kelvy, our tactician, gave them the same Italian salute as we went on by and won the race. So we ended up in the semifinals with two holes in our boat, but pretty pretty good opportunity and one of the best teams I've ever sailed with. John Cutler and I also say that that was the best race we've ever had in the America's Cup. So then we took this America True philosophy, best person for the job, a mixed team, a diverse team, different backgrounds. And I was hired with the French. So I was the general manager of the French team and we raced in Valencia. It was a mixed team with a lot of different Kiwi, Australian, American female in charge of French men, Swiss, Spanish, guy from the Canary Islands, Gency. It was a big mixed team. And we were definitely seen as like the underdogs there for sure. We didn't have a lot of money, but we started building our team. Leading up to the 2007 campaign was the first time we did, they called them acts. So this, like that's in Copenhagen. And we were in different regattas or different places in Europe where all the boats would go. So we're in Trapani, and we are racing. We didn't have enough money to build, we didn't have a leftover boat. So we bought the New Zealand boat from the 1995 Cup. No, from the 2000 Cup. So we had a decent boat, but it was an old boat. And we were racing in this series. And between the previous Cup and here, all of the boats, the rules allowed you to get on those jumpers, you could get flippers. So you could have a roach that would be a bigger sail up top. You could have a higher roach up top on the main. You could have more weight in the bulb, so there's more leverage. All of these little things increase the load on all of the bits and pieces. So we would break a block and then or jib sheet and get a bigger jib sheet. Then we'd break the block and get a bigger block. And we were in Trapani. I was on the chase boat on this day. It was two races that day. I was on the coach boat and they radioed over. They said, "We have a problem. I think we have a problem." And the guy who's trimming, straddling the winch is like, "I think it's moving." And I jumped on the boat. I went down below. I looked and I was like, "It's cracking." And the French said, "What does this mean?" I said, "It means we're fucked." So we headed in, dropped the sails, got in, and I'm like, we got to fix it, we got to fix it. So we already started taking the hydraulics out so we could take the mast out if we needed. We started pulling the deck hardware off. We started taking the winch off, like full on NASCAR pit team. We get in, and I can't find Yannick, our shore manager. He's having a cafe and a croissant, and he is not so interested. And I was like, "Yannick, what the hell? We have to, even if we don't make it, we have to do everything we possibly can to get this boat out on the race course." And he's like, "You're racing Alinghi. You're racing Team New Zealand with Ed Baird. They have not lost a race in 9 races. There is no chance that you will be able to win this race." And I'm like, "We must try." And then he still didn't want to go, so I brought the Kiwis over to shame him. And then he finally agreed. He did take his French t-shirt off, though. He didn't want his team shirt on because he's from Normandy and that's the way he is. And so the next morning, we show up to, the guys work all night. The team worked all night. We showed up to the boat, and the way they had fixed the deck was we had a food tent, and they had square legs, aluminum legs, and they had taken those and cut them down and put them underneath the deck. They had taken the 1/2-inch lunch table plywood and put plates on the top, and they had essentially bolted the lunch table to the top and the tent legs to the bottom and put big bolts through and washers. And I'm positive it was Yannick who said that this looks like crap. So they had painted it with flat black so it looked like carbon. So it was aggro Kiwi, but it looked French. We went out, and you know how why I'm telling this story. We went out and we were the first team to beat Team New Zealand in that boat in like 9 races, and we won the race. All of this and all of these stories are fun to tell, and I there's a whole bunch more detail, obviously, and that's when you end up at the bar and you're like, oh, and then this happened and that happened and bar karate. But the cool thing about it is I'm able to bring all of this to Oakliff Sailing, which is a public nonprofit in Oyster Bay. We end up with, gosh, this year we're almost full, and I think we have 2 spots left for Bermuda. High performance is going. We're training people for the Olympics. It's just going gangbusters. But the most important thing is lessons like that. You have to work together. You keep pushing. Even if you have 2 holes in your boat, you still race. You work as a team. You cut the freaking lunch table in half if you have to get out there and do what you're trying to do. So those are the lessons that I use every single day. We have a 9 o'clock meeting, and the kids, I feel kind of weird sometimes. I'm like, oh, story time. And then we go into some story. And as a matter of fact, I was at the Met School and I was talking Carol Cronin, who's written a fair amount of coastal fiction. She and I are talking about co-writing a book, which are just basically the stories you would talk about at with a glass of wine. Always welcome to come to Oakliff. If you get stuck at JFK, get on the train and come sailing.
Good night and joy be to you all.
But really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time tonight.
Thank you so
I
much, Don.
appreciate it. A plug for Adventure Sail in 1996. I think I was there in the very beginning with True Youth and Doris Colgate and Adventure Sail. So it's a good program, and it's wonderful to see that it's lasted that long.